one-way street where things are moving to the cloud.
Also, in terms of delivery of services itself, I mean, in terms of increasing productivity, now you say you're talking about saving taxpayers' money itself. Implementing it, how difficult was it on the ground? Because even government employees, all of them have to get trained to the new services. Was that also a difficult task to implement?
So I think that the training was not as difficult as making sure that putting the contracts in place. So a big part of the work that we did is to make sure that there were model contracts across the federal government. So we put out an RFP or a tender for $2.5 billion for collaboration technologies in the cloud. We put out a number of contracts, agency by agency, that focus on infrastructure. So that part of it took a lot of energy initially, but now that there are government-wide contracts in place, it makes it very easy, and the coefficient of friction is very low for other agencies to buy off of those vehicles.
Also in a recent article, you talked about the opportunity for emerging countries like India to adopt cloud computing technologies, given that there has been no legacy IT infrastructure, largely, especially for the government itself. What kind of opportunities do you see? You have this huge UID project that the government is implementing, where part of it is on the cloud. What kind of future opportunities do you believe that the Indian government can leverage? And given your experience within the government itself, how difficult or easy is it for them to implement something like this?
Well, I think, first and foremost, I think Nandan Nilekani is doing an excellent job. I met with him when I was in India last as I looked at how the UID project was progressing. I love the fact that they had this dashboard that showed you the progress, and it's going to fundamentally change the way services are delivered within India. So there you have an interesting implementation that's going to be a game changer for decades to come. And I think from a cloud computing perspective, whether you're operating at a local level, state level, or a central level, the opportunities to save are huge. You can cut costs by 50%, but that's not the real reason to move there, right? The reason to move there is because the government has a very difficult time to compete for the best talent when it comes to whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's developers. And it's really, really important to make sure that you concentrate talent, and some of these companies are doing some really amazing things. And technology inherently is a business where things change really, really fast. So there's huge opportunities to apply these web-scale efficiencies across the entire public sector, whether it's at the federal, state, or local level.
The technology industry in India has talked about a policy framework being framed by the government specifically with regards to cloud computing. What are your views on it? Is it easier to push technologies like this within a policy framework, and how fast can that be done? And what are your views in terms of how India can do it?
Well, from my experience in the United States, when I instituted the cloud-first policy, what it did is it gave incentives for cloud companies to actually make capital investments, because they realized that that was a U.S. government policy, that we were moving to the cloud. Therefore, they were able to take capital and deploy it towards the public sector market. I think stating where the government is going, because what I did is I said, look, we're spending $80 billion every year. $20 billion of that $80 billion we're going to move to the cloud. And those companies that are going to come and compete for this business, those are going to be the winners. And all of a sudden, we saw these companies actually even address some of the security issues. Sure. Google built a .gov cloud, so did Amazon, IBM came after that, and so forth, so did Microsoft. So you're seeing the markets respond to the demand. I think that what the government can do is it can set a vision of what is true north, and it can talk about where it's headed, and you'll see the private markets respond to that.
Also taking off from one of your earlier answers, specifically with regards to innovation and how you need to tap the best minds that's possibly available. But given the current macroeconomic uncertainty, do you believe governments will adopt more protectionist measures and not be able to harness the best minds that are available?
Well, I think it will continue despite the uncertainty or not. Right? And the reason is because One of the other compelling benefits is this move away from CapEx to OpEx. So what OpEx does is it gives you the certainty you're talking about year after year how much you're going to spend. But also, I think very quickly, in the same ways that a lot of governments around the world realize that they're not going to be in certain businesses. So, and what I mean by not being in certain businesses, you don't see governments owning hotels everywhere and saying that we're going to run hotels for all employees if they travel all over the world, or a fleet of cars, right? So in the same way, you'll see them moving towards the private sector to be able to leverage those solutions.
Also, as somebody who's watched the industry grow, your perspective on the growth of the Indian technology industry, largely in the services space, how can they play a role in this overall cloud environment that everybody's calling?
I think if you look at the private sector and a lot of the companies that are here, they're actually looking to build on top of those layers. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the infrastructure layer, you've got sort of the Amazon EC2 type of solutions. You look at Salesforce, it's got the application layer. Now, imagine the ability to combine services and the underlying technology together and being able to provide that as a turnkey solution, right? And that is going to be a very disruptive force. And not billing by the number of hours or number of people, but really thinking about these holistic solutions.
Also, the technology industry in India has talked about a policy framework being framed by the government specifically with regards to cloud computing. What are your views on it? Is it easier to push technologies like this within a policy framework, and how fast can that be done? And what are your views in terms of how India can do it?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the big reforms, even in the United States, is immigration reform. Recognizing, as the President has said, to stay competitive in the global economy, we need to think about how we reform immigration policy. But I think you look at the global grid now, right? You could go back to the agricultural revolution, as I mentioned, where people could literally live a lifetime within a 25 square mile. And then you move to the Industrial Revolution with the steam engine and trains and boats, and there was more commerce. And now in the Information Revolution, you have a global grid where you can connect people from around the world. An interesting example is what happened with Netflix. What Netflix did is it instituted a competition to see who could improve its algorithm for predicting which movies users would like. And you had a global team that was created from people from all over the world that ended up winning. I think in that vein, you're going to see more and more of that as we look at the cloud platforms that allow us to democratize talent and allow us to democratize technology solutions.
But do you see more protectionist measures in the current economic environment?
Well, I think we need to be very careful in terms of protectionist measures long-term will hurt any nation state.
So what next for Vivek Kundra? Are you looking at any role back in the government side, or would you rather be an outsider?
Well, right now I'm very focused, obviously, at Harvard as a fellow. I'm going to be doing that for the next 5 months in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it's a time for me as I reflect on the last decade in public service as I've spent at it. And I've been fortunate to have worked at every level of government, from city to state to county to federal. And now I'm looking forward to engaging in the global dialogue of the potential of technology, not just in the context of how we can disrupt the public sector, but what does it mean as far as healthcare is concerned? What does it mean as far as education is concerned? How do we look at the digital divide, and how do we make sure that people around the world have the same opportunities as those that are connected to the global grid?
So is it easier to look at implementing or drive the adoption of these cloud technologies from outside the government rather than within?
Well, I think I've spent the last decade, I've had an amazing journey in the public sector. Now at Harvard University, I look forward to engaging with people from all over the world to bring some of these web-scale efficiencies to these problems.
Vivek, thank you so much for talking to NDTV.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
So clearly, Vivek Kundra is not committing himself to any specific project inside or outside the government after his 5-month stint at Harvard. But he has kicked off an important technology trend, not just for the US government, but also for other emerging countries to follow.